Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today, Jarrod Brown. Now, Jarrod is a business guy, but he's also a ministry guy. And so he's the founder of the Lazarus Group, which is kind of a group of businesses that support Mission Lazarus, which is a nonprofit. So he kind of has one foot in both worlds, and this is going to be a lot of fun to unpack his passion for business and ministry. Jarrod, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jeff. It's really good to be with you today.
Well, Jarrod, we always like to start with just some background. Where did you grow up? What was that like? Was there any entrepreneurial stuff going on early? Any faith-related stuff, or did all that come later?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how I ended up wired the way I am. I'm born and raised outside of Nashville in Franklin, Tennessee. And, I like to say I was one of the lucky rich kids. My dad was first generation, go to college, drafted during the Vietnam stuff, came back, took advantage of GI Bill, got his MBA, CPA, and went to work just as, like an entry-level staff accountant for a large automotive parts manufacturer, and worked his way up to finance executive and traveled the world and had joint ventures and business dealings all over South America and Europe. And he recognized early on that language skills were a huge advantage in the business world, in the world he was in international business, and he encouraged me to study Spanish. And so when I went to college, I started at the University of Tennessee, and then was fortunate to go to University of Buenos Aires. Started at the University of Madrid. Then I came back to the U.S. and transferred to a small Christian university in West Texas, Abilene Christian.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd been to school in Spain, but I still couldn't speak Spanish. So I found a new program at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. And there were a lot less foreigners there, and it was sink or swim. And so after doing that, the language clicked, and I came back and finally graduated, and took the job I dreamed about. I was a business consultant, international division based in Houston, and was on a plane every week, on somewhere interesting, having adventures.
Yeah. Was it any particular industry or just general business consulting? What was the?
It was in technology software, which I had no background in at all. It was very unique software, so they did all the training for that. They were just looking, I guess, for bright, young, bilingual folks willing to work.
Yeah. So that was a real international focus from the very beginning. And then you were telling me before we started recording, you had kind of a mission trip experience that kind of changed your life. Is this the right time to tell that story?
Yeah, my family, we were in church all the time growing up. My parents were very strong believers, very generous, but it was kind of felt like, they would be the folks maybe that would write checks, and then the folks over here were the ministry folks.
Yeah.
And our very kind of traditional conservative church environment, there weren't mission trips and there weren't youth groups and all that stuff. And so when the opportunity came along, my junior year of college to go on a mission trip, I never experienced anything like that. And I think that going on a trip touches everyone in different ways, but very similar to, like, if you're driving through downtown Houston and there's a guy at a stoplight with a little sign, you don't typically roll down the window to get his story. Oftentimes we make sure the window's up so we don't hear the story. Once you hear and know the story, it's a lot harder to ignore what you've heard. And so for me, going on this trip and already being fluent in Spanish, Um, it exposed me to stories. This was right after Hurricane Mitch had devastated Central America. Like 30,000 people had died in the hurricane. And I'd never experienced anything like that. And even though I'd gone to school in South America, I wasn't out serving. I wasn't
Right.
face to face with poverty. And honestly, when I came back to the U.S. and I tried to think about what I'd experienced, I was trying to reconcile,
Yeah.
what I had and what they didn't have. When my ancestors were on a boat that went west, and their ancestors were on a boat that went southwest, and this was when the world was an even playing field, really. And so I'd done nothing to deserve all the opportunity and blessing that I had. Yeah, and sure, my grandfather fought in the war, and my dad worked hard and pulled himself up by his bootstraps to do something to afford me those opportunities. But they were inside of an environment that allowed for that to flourish. And so I couldn't reconcile that, and I wasn't at peace knowing that there was such a big discrepancy.
And we were talking, I think a lot of us have had those experiences as young people, going on mission trips, having what I'll call that holy discontent, coming back and trying to do those reconciliations. But I think, many people didn't take the radical steps you took in reaction. So maybe tell us the rest of the story. This is something that really was formative for you.
Yeah, I went back down to Honduras over Thanksgiving holiday, took a few extra days in 2000 to visit some of the folks. And there was ministry down there that we'd gone and worked with was going through a lot of growing pains. And I really recognized that they need someone here with a business mind to get this mess cleaned up, to be the bad guy, to hold people accountable, get the finances straightened out so that the pastors could go back to preaching. And so the young pastor family I was staying with, I told them, said, I'm going to quit my job and I'm coming here. And I'm sure they were thought, yeah, sure. They probably heard that.
Right.
And I remember I flew back to the U.S. on a Sunday. Monday morning, my client was in Chicago. It was a Land Rover dealership in Schaumburg, Illinois. And so it was a very distinct change from one day to the next.
Right.
Abject poverty. Now I'm in a Land Rover dealership.
Right.
And on Tuesday, I got back to the hotel that evening, and I called my dad, who was still in his office, and in Maryland Farms in Brentwood, Tennessee, and said, Dad, I'm going to quit my job and move to Honduras. And he very matter-of-factly, without even hesitating, replied, Jarrod, there's enough poor people there. They don't need one more.
Wow.
And when you're wired the way I'm wired, when you're told you can't do something or it's not possible, it just puts fuel in the fire to figure out how it's going to happen.
Thanks, Dad. Watch me.
Right. And so
not everybody would react that way either. Yeah.
That's right. 2 months later, I was on a plane with 2 suitcases to Honduras.
So great.
And I was only going to be there maybe 8 or 10 months is what I figured it'd take. But my dad's not wired like an entrepreneur.
Right.
He's very cautious.
Right.
And I'm wired very much opposite. I have a high tolerance for risk.
Mm-hmm.
And everywhere I looked, I saw so much opportunity. When I thought about the trip that I had gone on to serve, it was a huge waste of money in terms of trying to be efficient and how to run a trip, accomplish things. Obviously, it transformed me. I'm sure it transformed or impacted other people on the trip. But in terms of being good stewards of the funds, it just wasn't done well. And in terms of outreach, how to have an opportunity to share the good news with people, is like, there's so much opportunity here.
Yeah.
Why are we approaching it this way? And so God just showed me so much opportunity that year. And so that fall, I was like, I'm staying. I never dreamed that it would turn into
Right.
what it is today, but God's been very, very gracious with what He's called us to do.
So this is 20 plus years, and you still spend a lot of time down there doing this. So take us through a little of that evolution. I love the beginning story, but there's a lot of things that have happened in between. And I love this in between you have of, this ministry and business. We talk a lot on this podcast about people that are kind of running businesses and trying to do it differently. But man, you're doing it in a different country, trying to serve people, but you have this business brain, So like, I think that's something very unique to you. Can you kind of take us through these last couple of decades, if you will? Maybe walk us through the story a little more. How has this developed from there?
We started off with just very pragmatic, practical thing. We saw education as an incredible tool to be able to reach children, but also to build relationships with their parents and use that as a tool to be able to share the good news. But early on, I'd seen so many missionaries come through churches in the U.S. when I was growing up, and I didn't want to be one of them. If I was on a flight back to the U.S. and someone asked me what we do, I would almost cringe when I said I was a missionary, because
Right.
I didn't want to be seen as not being effective, productive, having a kingdom impact. We're investing kingdom capital so that the kingdom can be even larger. And so early on, we were playing a supporting role behind the scenes of trying to help the local preachers, pastors, evangelists have resources and tools to grow their church. And God kept showing us more and more opportunities. But in 2008, a hurricane ripped through the Caribbean and devastated eastern Cuba. And I was collaborating with another humanitarian aid organization to do surveys of devastation after natural disasters in Latin America. And they asked me if I could go to Cuba to take a look at it and possibly take some cash with me. And I'd been to Cuba before. I'd spoken at a conference there, and I'd had a permit from the U.S. government to do that, and learned how it was all done. It was a pretty simple process. And so I went, and unbeknownst to me, we drove about 12 hours from Havana back towards Guantanamo to the town of Holguin. And the devastation was widespread. It was everywhere, and there's no hardware stores, there's no supply stores, and we're interviewing people and finding out about the struggle. And I was staying in a home, like a bed and breakfast, and the gentleman there that owned the house reported me to the kind of the internal security of Cuba that tracks dissidents and whatnot. Long story short, I ended up being detained and put in a detention center. Was put in an interrogation room for 5 hours, and they thought that I was CIA trying to stir up unrest. And through that experience, when I got done being interrogated after 5 hours, I was sent back to my cell, and then I was brought back, and the colonel had my passport sitting on his desk. He'd been extremely nice the entire time, and he was telling me all the laws that I'd broken. And I finally said, okay, I'm going to quit my dog and pony show while I'm here. I'm trying to visit friends, whatever. I'm just going to say I'm sorry. And while I'm doing that, I heard the Lord say to me, ask this man if you can pray for him.
Wow.
And I had a little argument with God in my head.
Are you sure?
Right.
I really just want to get out of here, God.
That was exactly it. And I'd kind of started this Holy Spirit journey a few years earlier, and and just trying to be more attentive when God's trying to say things to me.
Wow.
And obedient.
Yeah.
And finally, I said, okay. And so the colonel quit talking, and I said, hey, you've been very respectful. I appreciate it. Would you mind if I said a prayer over you? And of course, he looked at me like I had 3 heads. And then to my surprise, he says, está bien. He says, okay. And I was shocked. And before I could even start to formulate a prayer, the door to the interrogation room swings open, and a younger official who was obviously higher ranking starts yelling at the colonel, "What are you doing?" And the colonel was so noticeably stunned that he stuttered when he was trying to explain that, "Oh, I'm just explaining the laws." And the younger guy looked at me, yelled at me, said, "Back to your cell," with my passport sitting right there. And that moment was really rough, and because I felt like I was getting ready to be free. And so I went back to my cell, and I was probably only there 30 minutes. It felt like hours and hours. And the door to the cell opened, and the cleaning woman was standing there. She had my passport in her hand, and she looks at me and says, "You can leave. Here's your passport." And I was dumbfounded and said, what do you mean? She said, "Yeah, you can leave." And so I get up, kind of in shock and confused, take my passport, and I walk out the hall, and I walk towards the front where they had brought me in and done the receiving and kind of the booking area. And I know they're getting ready to ask me, "What do you think you're doing?" So I turn around to say to the woman behind me, she told me that I can go. But when I turn around, there's no woman there. There's nobody
Whoa.
there. And I got to the desk at the intake booking area, and I just decided to walk straight on through the lobby and out the door. And the 2 men sitting there never said a word to me. And I walked out, got in my rental car at 4 o'clock in the evening, drove 12 hours through the night back to Havana, turned the car in at the Copacabana Hotel, got a cab to the airport, and made my 8 a.m. flight out of Havana to Panama to connect into Honduras. And I was scared the whole time that they were going to grab me at the airport.
Right.
Because they interrogate you why you've been to Cuba.
Right, exactly.
I knew all that was coming. But it was when I was sitting on the plane, and we all felt that feeling when the tires break traction with the asphalt.
Yeah.
And when that happened for the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to have freedom that I didn't deserve, because I had unknowingly broken the law. I truly had broken the law. And to have had this freedom given to me through circumstances that don't make sense by someone I didn't know. And I grew up in the church, and I was baptized at 12, but I never had that feeling of freedom and transformation. And I got it on that plane flying back to Honduras. And from that day, we were no longer going to be playing a behind the scenes role helping pastors. We were going to be taking the initiative to challenge pastors to think big, to think boldly and courageously about doing things differently than they'd ever done it, or that any seminary had ever told them was possible. And we're going to boldly and unashamedly preach the word of Jesus Christ in unique ways from that moment on.
You know what's so, obviously there's a lot of amazing things about that story. But one of the things that strikes me is you would not have had that moment of freedom that you didn't deserve, as you call it, had not other little steps of obedience happened. You know what I mean? Like, you and God can do it even without those steps. I mean, he can just give you a moment like that. But I just think I think usually, it's true for me, he sort of delivered a moment like that for me after other little steps of obedience, but then he wanted to create a step change in you, in me and many others. by giving that moment when it's just, I hope other people that are listening to this have experienced moments like that, and I hope they look for those, because there's nothing like that. That kind of feeling of freedom where, and God really becomes real, man. Like, you can study all you want, pray, all those things, but when He takes you through that kind of thing, that's amazing. And it's almost like you couldn't not be bolder. Does that make sense? Is that fair to say? Like, there's no way, like, you had to do a step change with that.
God, you got me out of this. God, if you got me out of this,
what am I worried about?
Take care of.
Yeah, what am I worried about? Like, am I bean counting something that's like, whoa, right. Like, all the little stuff shrinks and you're like, let's go for it, right?
Right. No, absolutely.
All right. Well, what does this next phase look like?
Yeah, so, pretty soon we realize in our region of Honduras, there's lack of access for children who are orphaned or abandoned and abused. So we worked hand in step with the Honduran government. We bought a 1,200 acre ranch that then grew to a 2,000 acre ranch and built a very unique home for children there. It's honestly, there's probably very few homes like it around the world. I've visited a number of homes. It's focused on the individual care, low number counts, high caregiver count. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this unspoken epidemic. I know it's true in Honduras, in rural Honduras. My guess is it's true in most developing countries, in particular in the rural areas, of childhood sexual abuse, mm-hmm. and oftentimes incestual. And it's this unspoken taboo that no one wants to talk about, and it's running wild and it's destroying people, because I think it's Satan's number one tool to put lies into a young person's head about who they are and how he sees them. So there's no pill, there's no quick fix, there's no quick solution to undo those lies that get tangled up in a child's head. And so we were committed to focusing on walking with each individual's child, oftentimes very slowly in their journey, in an environment that allowed them to thrive on this ranch, where they get an animal assigned to them to take care of, and they're all on a college prep track, but they're also every day milking their cows, and all the milk they consume come from their cows, and all the vegetables they eat came out of the massive family garden we had. And today there's 2,000 square foot homes on that property. But it's also the home for our operations base. It's also home for the Lazarus Academy, which is a bilingual K-12 academy that is focused on serving some of the poorest of the poor in our region. But at the same time, we also have paying students, because the level of education we're providing is sought after in our region. Mm. So the academy itself has got about, I think, like a $450,000 budget for this year, but we'll generate about $150,000 of that from tuition paid by wealthy families in town.
Wow.
But the fact that these children of these campesino farmers are having that same level of education.
I know, that's amazing that you created a school that other wealthy people want to go to. I've never heard of that. That's amazing.
Right. And when we started looking around, we had all this land. It was like, we got to put this to work, because we didn't have the region we're in Honduras. 20 years ago, there weren't many church groups going there. There's more now, but back then there weren't many, and a lot of folks didn't have the bad habits of asking for free things. They were asking for jobs, is what they're asking for. So we had all this land, and so we started farming tomatoes. We raised tens of thousands of pounds of Roma tomatoes that were exported to be made into ketchup for a while. And then we got into jalapeno peppers. For a while, we were the largest exporter of jalapenos to Arby's for their jalapeno poppers in the U.S. But the problem with that, because we wanted to use it not only as a tool to generate revenue for the ministry, right, but also as a sustainable tool to disciple people.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And with the peppers and with the tomatoes, you'd have a few people taking care of 10 acres of crops. And then you have a blitz of 40 people picking for 2 days. And then they're gone to the next farm.
Right.
And so about that same time, we had the opportunity to buy another large piece of land right by our ranch, about 450 acres with existing coffee on it. And so in 2006, we became coffee farmers. And that was a great opportunity because we were able to have a set group of people year round working on the coffee farm that we could do life with. And we didn't know anything about coffee farming, and there's not much coffee raised in Tennessee, or no coffee raised in Tennessee. So it was a big learning curve to figure that out, and then to figure out how we wanted to use it. So our farm, the last 10 years or so, has been focused on employing exclusively women from that mountain who for so many years didn't have a voice, weren't seen, suffered unthinkable traumas in an effort to have a way to try to provide for their children. And so to be able to empower them through a job that pays well, and also them just being curious when someone new comes to work for us, well, why are you doing this? And it opens up all these opportunities to talk about why we're doing it. And our quadruple bottom line of not only focusing on the dollars and cents, but also the people that are a part of it, and what motivates us, which is our faith. And so that's been a really incredible tool that's grown over the years, and is thriving now. One of our key business models that we operate, and operates in the U.S. as well, whereas we retail the coffee. And so our goal is to wholesale. We want to sell as much green coffee as we can. We retail, what we don't sell, but we don't want to be retailers. We just want to grow as much coffee to employ as many people as we can.
So do you think is that kind of the vision for the future, more on the coffee side?
The coffee industry is really tough. Right now is a great time. The coffee prices are highest they've ever been. So it's a good year for us. But the margins for coffee in the U.S. are really small, and it doesn't matter how well we want to take care of our people in the mountain. We can really quickly price ourselves out of the market.
Yes, right.
So it's a difficult balancing act there to be able to brag not about this incredible coffee, but about these incredible women and how we're taking care of them. Oh, and by the way, they grow this incredible coffee.
Yeah.
But it's a tough area to be in.
Yeah. And so do you have a vision for being able to have these businesses totally support the ministry at some point, or what's your sort of philosophy on that?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think that I think there's a lot of really successful businessmen and women out there that recognize that God's blessed them and they want to do something with it. But honestly, I think a lot of people are tired of, maybe feeling like they're throwing money down a black hole to solve the same problem that never gets solved. And a lot of our programs, which are focused around community health, chronic diseases, education, and economic development, they're not quick fixes. They don't give you a real big warm and fuzzy in the moment, but they're not the Band-Aids. We're trying to go back upstream to solve those problems.
Okay.
So that if I come to you, Jeff, and I ask you, hey, Jeff, if we had $1,000, we could buy some rice, we could feed some really hungry people and solve this hunger issue right now. And you're like, okay, well, sure. Yeah, I want to be a part of that. And then, 6 months later, I come back, hey, Jeff, could we get together? I want to tell you how we used your money. Sure, right. Jarrod, love to. We get together and I tell you, and then I'm like, but you know what? If we had another $1,000, we could get more rice. And you're thinking, wait a second. But I thought with the $1,000, we were getting the rice to solve the problem. And so it's a never ending cycle. So we want to figure out what are the issues causing the problem where people aren't buying their own rice in the first place,
Right.
and try to work on those. And so we feel like we're providing an opportunity for folks to really be engaged, not only to potentially fund efforts that we're trying, but so they can learn from us, because maybe they have another passion in another part of the world, or maybe right at home, and they want to see how someone else is doing it. We want them to come and learn and take what they see there and apply it other places as well. Someone asked me years ago, and he's probably someone who's similar to you in a past life. He was a Wall Street investment banker guy. His home was in Texas. He'd fly to New York every Monday morning, fly back Friday night. And he heard me speak, and he came up and said, "How much money do you need to scale?" One of our other businesses is a leather goods company, Lazarus Artisan Goods. And he said, "How much money do you need to scale this? The people in my portfolio, this is something they'd like to be a part of. I could probably come up with $20 million pretty quickly if that could get more equipment, more space, put more people to work." And before I could even say, he said, "Well, you know what? Being honest, we could probably do 30, maybe even 35. I just need you to get me some information." And then I started said, our factors that limit us from scaling is not having the equipment or the resources to buy equipment or have more space. It's how many leaders do we have inside of the business, so that we're intentionally using the business as a tool to grow the kingdom rather than just a business to generate revenue. And for us, in our context, doing it overseas, where these businesses were born out of the ministry, now they're standalone for-profit businesses, it's really important for us that we keep that kingdom focused, and that we grow intentionally and slowly, rather than just being focused on how can we scale it.
That's really interesting. Leaders are the limiting factor. That is a really interesting point. Are you able to develop those leaders? I mean, how does it look? So it sounds like it wasn't a money thing. It's how are we doing it, developing people that can multiply?
Yeah, when we started out at one point, I think we had like 7 missionaries on the ground in Honduras. But from day one, we wanted to focus on working ourselves out of a job.
Right.
And to do that, it was through equipping, empowering, and then, some might say then follow-up, supervision, whatever. But for us, we say discipling, journeying with them. There's plenty of very highly educated, very skilled people in Honduras. My alma mater has a recruiter based in Honduras just for wealthy Christian families who want to send their kids to great education in the U.S. But we want to focus on a demographic that, due to the separation of classes, they've never had the opportunity to do anything except what the same thing they've been doing for generations.
Yeah.
And that's why there's such an enormous demographic of people that don't feel like they really have much option other than trying to immigrate to the U.S. illegally. And so we're focused on that demographic and finding the leaders in that demographic that are willing to work hard and to learn, and honestly, to change their family's legacy. We just did a big impact story this week about a man named Ernesto. He's part of the Lazarus Academy faculty. He's our head leather shop instructor. Part of the Lazarus Academy is a vocational track.
Yeah.
Where students, even though it's a college prep school, every student will graduate with a marketable skill as well.
Nice.
So Ernesto takes leatherworking, and then the graduates of our leatherworking have an opportunity to go to work for our leather goods company as well. And Ernesto grew up poor, made it to 6th grade. His father told him going to school is for lazy people. He's dreamed of being a teacher, and he had an opportunity to learn how to make boots. And when I was living and going to school out in West Texas, I fell in love with custom-made boots.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met Ernesto and found out about how good his boot making skills were, Let's just say when I lived in Honduras, I had far too many pairs of cowboy boots. But when we were going to launch this new vocational program, I approached him about coming to work for us, and he wasn't a believer, but he was just, you could tell, he was just a good person and hard worker, and he jumped at the opportunity. And through the environment of being inside of an organization that is committed to living and breathing the good news of Jesus on every level, he gave his life to Christ. He was baptized. Eventually, his whole family became believers. He also enrolled in our adult education program in 7th grade. Last December, he graduated from high school.
Wow.
And now he's enrolled in college. And not only is he one of our teachers for a vocational school, Ernesto is also our head designer and leathersmith for Lazarus Artisan Goods. With every bag and article that we sell, it's been part of his creation. And so many of the students that come through the program view him as a surrogate father, because families are so fractured oftentimes in impoverished situations. And to find those leaders like Ernesto, and there's so many out there, but you have to be committed to journey with them slowly. And it is a very slow process sometimes, but it's well worth it.
Well, our friend in common, Brandon Barnholt, introduced us, and I know this model that you're following of really trying to do kind of holistic development, kind of to the root cause, and teach people to fish, not just give them a fish. I mean, I think it really appeals to guys like Brandon and business people who, I mean, it's business 101 that you're doing, in a missional fashion. I think that really appeals to people. And, Jarrod, most of the people listening to this are business owners, and they've got those skills, and they really want to do something meaningful for others. What is something that you've learned? What's just maybe a practical tip for them that they can apply tomorrow to kind of be thinking in this direction, how to help other people with their business skills?
I think one of the most practical ways is to start right in-house with your own business. And I think a lot of business leaders are a little apprehensive about, they don't want people to think that they're force feeding the Bible to their folks or whatever, but there's so much need right at home. I don't think that God only wants us to take our profits and deploy it overseas. He doesn't care more about the impoverished farmer in Honduras than he does your staff and employees right at home, wherever you are. And so leaning into that and doing the unconventional about it gets messy. When you run a kingdom business, it gets messy because you're aware of their lives. And when you become aware of them, it's just like me understanding on that mission trip what they're saying in Spanish. Once you know, you can't unhear it.
Yeah.
So start right there. And just because you've heard you can't do that, if you're an entrepreneur, those words don't resonate with us when we're told we can't do that. So find a way to do it. And then engage your team. We have these partners that bring their employees on service trips that are from all sorts of different faith backgrounds that come and serve with us. And someone's like, you're going to have people that are non-believers come to serve? Absolutely. They're coming to serve and see an organization that for many of them is showing a different side of Christianity than what they've seen, because they have a bad taste in their mouth for what it means to be a Christian or to be going to church. They're disenfranchised with the church. They were hurt by the church. And for them to have an experience of a healthy way to build relationships and to plant seeds. Early on, we were really heavily focused on trying to get people to accept Christ and baptize people. 5 years in a row, we track all these KPIs inside the organization. We had like 500 baptisms a year, 5 years in a row. And even in 5 years, I turn around and look back and like, wait a second, there's not 2,500 more people in the 25 churches we've planted. And so I realized, we were really good salesmen, but we were horrible with the customer service.
Right.
And we shifted our approach dramatically to doing life, discipling people.
Yeah.
And we've not been called to sprout seeds. We've been called to plant seeds. And so providing those opportunities for your staff to serve and your teams to serve and to help make that trip happen, that's a lot of money. We have a number of corporate partners that pay for their employees to go on service trips. They might have to use a couple of days of vacation, but they're going to serve and you're paying for it. Don't think about it as, oh, well, I could have had more money to give to that organization. Think about it, the investment you made in your people because they were able to go serve.
Yeah, I love that start at home idea. Maybe even start small, start at home. Maybe take people on a little mission trip. Then it just I want to make the bar lower for people to get started in this direction. I think some people are frozen. They want to. Maybe they went on that mission trip when they were young, and that ember is still there of wanting to do more. And so I really like that. And then the sort of picture I'm seeing in my brain is the picture you painted of your own journey, where the opportunity you were given, the encouragement to learn another language, you go down that path, you start following the little whispers in God's ears to go here, ask this question, do this. Then he kind of reveals a bigger picture to you. And as you have that sort of what I call progressive revelation, he takes you on an amazing journey. And it won't be the same for somebody listening to this walking their dog right now. It probably isn't moving to Honduras for whoever's listening to this feeling that tug. But it is a bigger vision and it's better. And you shouldn't fear it. These small steps of obedience that lead to a bigger vision that is way more fulfilling, I think is available for all of us. So I thank you for sharing your story that I think illustrates that path. It's been really fun, Jarrod.
Jeff, one more quick thing I'd like to add, because I'm sure there's a lot of folks already engaged in serving and going places. And I think oftentimes very savvy businessmen and women, when they go and visit a mission point, a ministry, they see things that don't quite make sense and they don't feel like they can ask questions.
Yes, great point.
Or they get the answer of, well, you don't understand how it's done here.
Right.
And when you're getting those pushbacks, then you need to ask even more questions, because what we know to be true is that sound business principles are the same around the world. And if a ministry is pushing back when you ask just simple questions about accountability, about KPIs, about transparency, you need to ask more.
Great point and a great encouragement. Use those skills. God's given them to you for a reason, those business skills.
Absolutely.
Lean into them. Well, Jarrod, thanks so much for being with us. It's been great to hear your story and a real inspiration.
Yeah, thanks for connecting with me, Jeff.
All right. And thanks, everybody, for joining us on this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. Share it with a friend, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.